Hello, and welcome to Mappa Monday on Unleashing Barguests. I am, of course, Fishy, and today we'll be going back to the work that we started last week on Kalwin's Bay. This is a city in the Chthona setting that I created over a decade ago now for an unpublished fantasy project. It's now part of a different unpublished fantasy project because it was what started as the setting for a set of simple dungeoneering rules for my Obsession RPG. Kind of grew in the telling until it's now a full RPG, or hopefully will be. The setting grew out of control. It was meant to be just a place where there were going to be dungeons, and I got carried away with it, essentially. But Kalwin's Bay is a part of that. And it is where the player characters for tomorrow's actual play game on this channel are arriving. They've sailed over there in the last session, and tomorrow they will be arriving right here. These very docks. Not really here, as usual. Okay, fair enough. Hello, Chrono. Hello, Alia, who isn't really here. So yeah, this is the bit that I initially wanted to get mapped. I wanted the docks because obviously the docks are where they're arriving, and while a good description from the GM is great, it's also quite helpful for people to be able to see what's around them. So I wanted just that section so I could present them with a map, and that. I started that last week. Continued it after the stream, so got the dock area done. But as you can see, let's just swap to the other window there and zoom out a bit, you can very quickly see there's not much of the rest of the city yet. Oops, it's not mean to zoom out quite that far, but I've given myself plenty of room to work with, and we've made a solid start on this dock area, which I filled in enough to be able to export the bit that I needed without it having gaps on the outside. And we will continue with that today. I changed after the stream. I made some changes to the docks. I was using roads for the docks. Now this style actually has a dock tool, but it puts them on the buildings layer, and I don't like the idea of docks that tower sort of several feet above the ground. That seems to be silly. But what it does do, using that technique, a variation on that tool, I tweaked it a bit. It means that we have a shadow so that they do stand out above the water rather than being previously kind of submerged under the water using the road tools. So what I did is I set up a new building sheet, buildings docks, gave that less of a drop shadow than the other building sheets. And because it's a building sheet, the docks can be drawn onto that sheet absolutely fine, and they'll work the way they're supposed to. Just copied the various effects from the building sheet, lowered the drop shadow to give them less height so that buildings can actually loom over docks rather than them looking the same height, and it seemed to work out okay with a little bit of a tweak. So we can now see that we've got down here where I've made some changes. I've extended a promenade along the seafront here from the docks, and we've got some towers in, but you can see that these buildings do actually look to be taller than the docks. That one is those two are a little bit too close for my tastes, but I'm not going to start trying to tweak that now. I also added a couple of these hexagon buildings in this open plaza section behind the actual dock front, and I'm putting them in as a description as being open pavilions. So they're kind of like, anyone who's been to a British seaside will have no doubt, unless there's something very strange with that particular place, have seen a bandstand somewhere. It's that kind of thing, not necessarily intended for a band, but nice open-sided pavilion, just a place you can shelter from the rain on bad days, or just a place to take a break or a rest when you're on the docks. So mostly for the new arrivals, but also, of course, for people who work there. So we've added them in, and that gives a nice feature and breaks up that courtyard. We have also, as we extended out from there to fill the space, we started putting in some green bits. So we've got a bit of green over here by the old town walls. So these are the walls of Newton, as it originally was, before it merged with Red Wharf to become Kalwin's Bay, which was originally the name of the area rather than the settlement. And we put a bit of green along the outside of the city wall there and planted some trees and a little bit of space opposite where, instead of a building in that space, which I could have put, I just decided to put some greenery in there instead. So we've got a little bit of a park inside the city. This area of city that we're working on, I've been working on, has been quite closely packed. The buildings are quite close together. I've given serious thought on occasion to how close they are. Some of them are deliberately too close to form alleyways. Others I have left far enough apart that you do get a gap between the buildings that can form alleyways. But we've got areas like this where the buildings are pretty close together, and then we've got other areas where they're a little bit less tightly crammed in. But I figure around by the dock area is going to be real estate that is going to get used pretty heavily. So it's a combination of rich people want it for business purposes, but not for residential purposes. Too close to the docks to be good for residential purposes, and as such, they're cramming as much into it as possible for business purposes. And the people who are forced to live there just can't afford any land, any space around their house. So in the other parts of the city, the buildings are likely to be further apart. I've got some roads that kind of stop in the middle of nowhere, like this one here, which I put the road in to form a framework, and I took it as far as there, knowing that I can add to that and extend that further out as I start doing that part of the building. These roads have been put in mainly to provide a framework for the buildings in this area. You can see I haven't filled in this space over here as yet because it was outside of the area that I was exporting, so it wasn't a priority. I didn't need to get it done. We've got some interesting looking areas popping up. This section here where we've got almost a square of buildings around one central one, but not quite. That's an interesting region. That just kind of came out because it was where I put the buildings. But we've got a couple of narrow alleys there and a wider one on this side, leading into a nice wide space around whatever this central building is. I don't think that this is actually any kind of organized compound. It could be something like maybe a university where these buildings all belong to the same facility. But it could equally just be that these are separate buildings and somebody made use of the space in between. I kind of like the idea of something like maybe a university there. There is a limit to how much universities are a thing in this setting. It's really a little bit early, probably. You know, your standard medieval fantasy is perhaps a little bit early for universities. But at the same time, once you've introduced fantasy elements like magic, scholarly achievement skyrockets when you get into a fantasy game. When you think about something like Dungeons and Dragons, the average Dungeons and Dragons character has knowledge that is at least 100 years past their time. It's the interesting little things that are not done on purpose by players, but are done by accident because they are modern humans. And I'm guilty of this as much as anybody else. You get things like, for example, people making the assumption that thinking is done in the head, that it is the brain, which is a remarkably modern idea. The whole thing about gut feelings and gut instincts, a lot of that comes from the fact that there was a point where, it was believed that the heart of consciousness was in the gut, not the head. The idea that it was the brain is relatively late. So what I might do with that is actually make it a sort of a college, but make it perhaps a magical one. Not Hogwarts by any stretch of the imagination, but a place of magical study. I don't know how much I want to do that in Kalwin's Bay. Magic certainly exists in this setting. I'm keeping this, for simplicity's sake, I'm keeping this game relatively magic light. None of the players were offered the chance to play a mage. But at the same time, another playtest that has been ongoing, played very, very infrequently for years now, only actually played it half a dozen times, and it's been going for years, is a battle mage in the same setting up in the north. So Drutikup, one of our players, does have an apprentice battle mage character who is moving remarkably slowly on her journey between Redhelm's Keep and East Peak, delivering a message to another mage from her master, and that's where I'm really testing the magic rules for this. I've got the FX rules down for Obsession, and I know they work, but I have to build spells and things like that, and she's helping out quite nicely with that. So I've got magic, and I've got a breakdown of the different types of mage, even though this isn't a class-based system. So I could have something like a college there that maybe it's a little bit of a mix. Maybe you've got one of the buildings is for teaching magic, and another one perhaps is physicians, studying medical law, and it would be as much research as teaching, yes, Chrono, because this is the stuff that they are still figuring out in this sort of era. I'm just going to move one of these buildings, because just looking at this in close, there's a big old gap between this building and the road next to it. And while that works fine, it's not quite big enough to do anything with it, but it's big enough that it looks a little bit wrong to me. So I'm actually going to move that building up slightly, put it a bit closer to the road. In fact, maybe if I do something similar with this one and bring it down the other way. They're a bit far from the road on either side as well, aren't they? And maybe I should just replace them with different buildings that fit the space better. Because at the moment they don't fit that space particularly well. We've got a big old gap between them there. Let's make a slight change. Let's get rid of this lower stone one. And I'm going to move the top one again. I'm going to move it closer in on this side, because that does give me just enough space that I could maybe do something with it on that side. I could put in, you've got 6 or 7 feet there, so that I could have something like, say, a hitching post. That could be an inn, so I could have hitching posts there for horses if it's an inn or tavern, or something along those lines. Or even an administrational building could have the same kind of feature. And that's something that I could always actually demonstrate. Now, these are mostly modern and sci-fi vehicles in this particular thing. But I could put in... That seems remarkably large for what it is. Let's just pop it down over here. And then move it into position and take a look. Oops, I'm accidentally putting in more of them I didn't want to do. Now, this is also a vector graphic, so it's not that bad. I was thinking that the horse seemed to be about 10 feet long, which is, pretty big for a horse. But it is quite big. It's definitely a horse and cart, not a mule, isn't it? At that size. I might shrink that slightly, but let's bring it in over here. Yeah, for a simple horse and cart, that's definitely too big. It should be at most like 2 squares. So leave us shrink that. So we will get our sizing tool. Do it. Scale origin. We will scale it from the center there. And we will just shrink it down like that. And now our horse is about, from nose to tail, about 6 feet maybe, and that seems to be rather more reasonable. Yeah, very much drawn by a Shire horse. I think I would rather use a bitmap horse graphic from a different set, but I'm not going to go importing things from other symbol sets right now. But that's, at least there is something there to remind me that I want to put something in there, like maybe some hitching posts or something. If they're coming in diagonally, the horses will fit quite nicely next to the road there. I mean, that wagon, even now, after I've shrunk it, that wagon takes up the entirety of that road. Which is reasonable. It's only a 5-foot road. So, yeah, you're looking at one-way traffic if people are bringing wagons through them, carts through them. And then I've got room to put a couple of buildings in down here below now. So, let's go to our buildings tool. Oh, wacko, what have you done to our building? You've given us... I'll tell you what, I'm going to reset that the easy way, because it should take the settings from elsewhere. So what I'm going to do is I am going to just draw some more, draw some more roads attached to one of the streets. Let's do here. Draw some more roads attached to one of the streets. Buildings attached to one of the streets. Okay, that's interesting. Why are you not actually drawing anything? Street, first end of street, second end of street. Oh, there we go. Right, now it's letting me. So I'll delete those, but at least they'll hopefully reset my building tool. So now I can come back down here and put a couple of buildings in here, and my building tool should now, yeah, there we go. Now I've got a couple of stone buildings can come in here. So let's leave enough space for an alley between them. And we'll go slightly bigger one on this side. And then one next to it. And there we go. That fills that space a little bit better. Got more stone buildings, large wooden one next to it with space for horses or what have you, which I need to remember to remove that horse. Plus, it's towering over the building for some reason. Just looking at that, it looks to be casting a shadow over the building. Oh, what the hell layer it put that in on? Anyway, I think the next thing that I want to do is give myself a little bit more shape to the city overall. My initial work was, as I said, very much around the docks. But I want to give a bit more shape to the city as a whole. And I've got to think about how big I want the city to be. It's a fair size, but it doesn't need to be absolutely huge. So if I say that Red Dwarf marks pretty much the edge of the city in that direction, which is a good thing because the edge of the map in that direction is also pretty much marked by Red Dwarf. Stole your building, the economy difference makes it valuable in the modern age. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am going to bring some road round to the other side. I'm going to go with a 10-foot smooth road. And I am actually going to take it from this bottom road here, and I'm going to bring it up and round. And one of the things that this will do, because I've chosen a smooth road, it will attempt to smoothly draw a path between the points that I select. So the software itself will do the smoothing on it. I don't need to try and get, if I want it to be actually circular, then I have to put some work into it, and there are ways of tweaking the tools to get around that. But as it is, that just gives me an equivalent to the road at the bottom at the top, if you see what I mean. So I can now think to myself that the city primarily consists of the space within these roads. I'll kind of need some justification for why that road exists, particularly because I've got it dipping down at the far end. I may actually change that. Let's actually, now that we think about it, let's be a bit more sensible at this end. Because what would make more sense if I delete a few points. Let's zoom out. Make sure that my current working point is at the right end. And if I carry that on kind of straight towards the road over here, then I can justify it as being essentially a bypass. It's a very modern term to apply to it. But what we've got now is a road that perhaps would have been used by people coming from the east, from the villages and towns in that direction, which there are villages and towns in that direction, and wanting to head north up the riverside, but not come through the city, perhaps because they want to avoid taxes or whatever on our way through that space there. Now they could cut north and avoid it completely, but let's assume for the moment that they've just followed the coast up, come to this point, said we don't want to be going through Kalwin's Bay, let's go round. And over time, they have just formed a road simply by passing that way. So this forms not the edge of the city, but actually the outskirts of the city at that time. And the city's probably expanded since yet further. So I am going to put some bits of city on that road. Let's get our street tool. And we'll put a few buildings there. I'm not going to go all the way. I'm just going to put buildings in places on this. So this is just a few buildings. I'm going to come right the way up to the corner there, though, as the city has gradually extended out to fill the available space and follow the road. And what you get is you get people that have essentially, these aren't going to fit very well there. I'm going to need to make a lot of modifications on buildings at that point there. What we've got is people moving out, initially providing services. So if you are... Oh, lovely. So yeah, what you get is initially you get people providing services. So you know that there are merchants and farmers and things that are bypassing your city, and there's a road that they are using to go round the outskirts and not come into the city. You still want their money. So what you do then maybe is you pop out there and you build a tavern. You have a little watering hole to try and grab them on their way past, and things build up around that. And they're not building up full settlements. They're too close to the city. They're still part of the city. But nevertheless, you've got these little areas where people have started building, rather than come out from the city every day to try and catch people coming past. They've just constructed their smithies, taverns, merchant outposts, etc. out there. And the inhabitants of those are all paying city taxes, but the people that they're dealing with aren't coming into the city and therefore aren't. So it's reasonable to assume that in each of these locations, we will have a road coming into the city. And the default road is not the road I wanted to use. The default road is paved. None of these are going to be paved roads. They are going to be dirt roads. But we will go with 10-foot dirt roads, because they're going to start out simple foot tracks, really. But because they're seeing use, they are going to get more solid relatively quickly. And we'll build these coming down into, I'll put that one at an angle, I think, coming down into the city. This is not a walled city. We've got these partial internal walls, but we haven't got actual city walls here. It's not needed in this place, so they're not using them in this place. So the city is just going to kind of fade out as it moves in that direction. Let's put some more roads in, though. So let's have a nice road. Let's not go too straight. Oops, that was a street tool, not a road tool. That's not going to help. I want a road tool. Let's not go too straight, because it always looks a bit odd to my eye. I've got these nice straight roads on there. I keep pointing that way. You can't see anything that way. That's my monitor. That's not what you're looking at. I should be pointing that way. I've got these nice straight roads inside the city because they're easy to draw. But when you look at the city overall, it looks a bit odd. They've got those parallel exact roads in what is not a modern planned city. So let's put in a nice long slightly angled road there, and then we can start connecting things to that. So if I use the node tool, I can take the end of that road there and try and follow it at roughly the same path, but we'll connect it to that road. And we'll do the same with this one. But we won't with this one. Instead, what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to go back and I'm going to take the 10-foot road again, and I'm going to come up across here, then across this way, and then back down. And I'm going to be coming straight through a building doing this, but that's okay because I can fix that after the fact. And we're getting, a framework of the way the roads are beginning to look. Let's come down and deal with the fact that this building has a road going through the middle of it by moving some of these buildings, because they're terribly far apart here. So let's move that a little bit closer. Now, picking more than one building at a time when moving these doesn't really make any difference. I've still got to move the second building on its own, but I'm not moving it as far if I drag them along together. And that is giving me, I think, enough room to move that one in there, and it's no longer got a road through the middle of it. There we go. Those will get tidied up when I'm working more on this part of the city. Yes, it is entirely possible that such things could happen. Not in this city, I feel. Great believer in what is appropriate. The other thing, of course, is you get situations like the Great Fire of London, where large portions of the city are rebuilt after a disaster. And those tend to be rebuilt on a more organised manner. Because what starts out as an organic growth of things being put together just as somebody comes in and builds a new building wherever there's a space, or knocks down a couple and replaces them with something more to their tastes. When you get an organised rebuilding, which normally will only happen after a major disaster in this kind of situation, then there tends to be more planning, because then you know it's all happening and there tends to be some big project to do that, like the rebuilding of large parts of London after the Great Fire, at which point some of the small, old, dodgy little places disappear, but others find themselves neatly up against far more organised and better built regions, and you just turn a corner and suddenly you're in somewhere that is clearly older and less well designed, less well planned. I think I am going to connect these roads together. We'll go back to our dirt road and we will use the endpoint tool to connect to the end of this bit of road here. We'll come along here and we'll hope, so what we'll do is we'll stop there. Then we'll do it again from here, coming down, because it is going to be easier to get back. No, to hell with that. We're going to move the end of the road. So we're literally just moving the road, extending that road down. And then we'll do the same here to move this road along, keeping it in the same nice straight line to meet there. Now the question is, do I connect that all the way down to the coast road there? It seems to me that it kind of makes sense to do so, doesn't it? Let's just try and keep the same line, bring that down to the coast road. So now we've got parts of the city there that are connected by a decent width, 10-foot wide, decent width roads to the docks, because the docks are all down here. So, you know, for this section here, we can come up from either the docks at Old Red Wharf, which I just have established are going to be more the fishing docks, as opposed to the trade docks, which are over here to the west. And it all seems to be working out quite nicely. That's interesting. I didn't replace that. I've just noticed I didn't replace that bit of roadway there with the dock promenade tool. So that wants to be replaced. First up, let's delete that bit of road. Now, that says I've got two entities picked. I'm going to hope that that two entities are the road and the road background, because it hasn't turned the water pink, so I don't think I'm accidentally deleting the water here. Nope, I didn't. Good. Whew. Let's go to our building docks layer. Look at all of our tools, and we will find our dock tool in here somewhere. Where did we hide it? Oh, that's interesting. It looks like the dock is a vary color. Hadn't realized that. So I can in fact have wooden docks by the looks of it. So let's do that. Let's just have this come along here, following that line and out to the tower there, and then we will move it to the back so that it's underneath the stone ones. And as we get to this eastern edge, our nice stone dock front becomes a wooden promenade along the seafront to there. That works quite nicely. I actually rather like that. Troop movement is always a thing to consider when you're looking at road structures. I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but the road running along from the back of Ramsgate Harbour, along the coast towards what is now Ramsgate Port, though that port obviously didn't exist at the time. That is called Military Road because it was made to ease troop movements. Again, it's Napoleon's fault, but from the other side. Awful lot of troops were shipped out through Ramsgate, heading across to the continent to fight Napoleon. And that whole road along the back, running from the back of Ramsgate Harbour, that was constructed for that purpose, to aid troop movement, and is called Military Road as a result. So, I apologise, I'm a little bit all over the place today. I knew I wanted to continue this map, but I didn't have a firm plan as to exactly what I was doing with it today. I should have tried to figure that out before I started my stream. And instead I just soaked in the bath, which is probably less practical, but far more fun. Never did like planning. So let's get some more smaller roads hooking these existing roads together. So we'll have one there, and we'll have one coming down here at a slight angle. And for good measure, we'll also connect these roads together. And each of these roads, of course, is giving us some shape to the city that we can justify in our heads as we work with it. There's two ways you can do it. You can make the plan in advance. You can decide how it's going to work. For some reason, I keep looking at my microphone instead of my camera. You can decide how it's going to work and then try and draw something that fits that plan in your head. Or you can draw something that looks cool and then figure it out in your head. I'm far more of a figure it out afterwards kind of guy. Now, I'm going to do the same trick I did over there to connect these two roads together, really. So what I will do, I feel, is I'm going to create a new road, new 10-foot road. We'll use F5 to connect to the end of this road, so I don't need to mess around trying to make them line up. We'll use the other technique this time around. Last time I extended the roads to make it work. This time around, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to here. I'm going to use F5 again to connect to the end of this road. And then I'm going to take a look at that, and I'm going to say, ooh, that angle's off. Look at that. It looks really weird. But then I can fix that by eye by moving this point here until it looks a bit neater. And that actually, it's not perfect. Perfection is, of course, perfect is, of course, the enemy of good and the enemy of finished. So I'm not going to try and make it absolutely perfect. I'm going to adjust it a little bit more. No, that's too far. Yeah, I'm going to call that good enough because I'm never going to get any more work done if I spend forever trying to get that corner angle sorted out in my head. I'm going to call that, therefore, good enough. And let's get some buildings in here. Now, interesting thing with this tool, the street tool, is it stops at the end of the street. So therefore, where I've connected a different road section in there, I need to stop and start again with the street tool and fill any gaps by hand. Not a problem, just a thing to keep in mind when you are working with joined roads rather than one long road. I mean, I could have done this, if I'd planned better, I could have done this as one long road and just started from there, put in a dog leg there and come all the way along. But of course, that's not how I built it because it's not how I was thinking at the time. I don't want to go too far up any of these roads because, as we have already established, the city kind of tapers off going in this direction. So this major road is clearly a major road and as such needs to be within the boundary of the city, unlike the bypass road, which we'll come up with a better name for, which is on the outside of the city quite deliberately, in-world deliberately, let alone us deliberately. But we're not going all the way up these roads because we've got the edge of the city somewhere along between these two sections. We can, in fact, make some steps to give an idea of that edge of the city. We can put in some 5-foot smooth road. I'm just going to use 3 points for this road because then it will be very smooth indeed. There'll be no weirdness in the angle. It'll just be one smooth curve between those two roads. And I think we will put a solid street all the way along the inside of that curve. But then we'll do it patchily on the outside of the curve. So we're back to our idea of the city kind of tapering off, going in this direction. So there's some construction here, but it's not, it's the edge of the city, essentially. So new builds are being put in here. Most of the buildings along here are likely to be newer, because that's where there is space to build new buildings if you need a new building. But it's kind of marking the edge of where the city really is. And then I'm going to put another one. This time I'm going to use a straight road rather than the curve one, because I like a bit of variety. I don't like everything to look too samey. So some of the roads are straight, some of the roads are curved, some of them are off at odd angles, some of them are not. And again, we'll have our street run the inside of that road solidly. And I think we'll do solidly from here to the road edge. I'll put something in on that corner. And we'll go solidly from here to the road end. But then we'll leave a gap in the middle. Actually, no, let's put just a couple of buildings in the middle there. Again, logically new builds. Now we're starting to get a better idea of what the extent of our city is going to be. We can see where the city goes, and we can see how much work we've got still to do to get this whole city mapped. It takes a long time to map a decent sized city, and these aren't even that big, if we're honest about it. I've yet to draw a really big city. The most impressive cities I've done are Lithopolis and Red Helm's Peak. Red Helm's Peak, really happy with that map, but it still works out realistically as being about like 10 to 11,000 population, which is pathetic. When you're talking about fantasy role-playing games, where often you can find cities, metropoli in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, and I'm drawing my bigger cities are around 10 to 15,000, so it makes you kind of wonder. Thank you, AutoMod, for catching that. Don't know why I'm thanking AutoMod. It can't hear me. Right, let's get some buildings in. The road and street tools are absolutely key for getting a city started, because once you've got your roadworks in there, and once you've got some streets along those roads, so it's putting in the first of your houses that way, it's quick, very quick. It requires, the way I do it at least, it requires a lot of further work afterwards, but it does get them done quickly. Why did that not let me put anything in there? I think there may be a break in the road there. I may have just accidentally started at the end of a road. I don't remember that being two roads connected together, but it could well be. But once you've got these initial sets of roads and buildings in, you've created a framework for your city relatively swiftly that you can then work on when you're putting the rest of the city together. Now over here, I've got a road that I just I put it in without any great concern because I needed a framework road. And as it stands now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect it to this one over here, but I'm going to do it at an angle. So I will go to my 10-foot dirt road again. Once again, I will use F5 to start at the end of this road, and I'll put just a little bit in that at the same line as that road, just so that I know it works properly. And then I'm going to bring it up to here. So it's coming in opposite this narrow road coming down at that angle. And then at this point, that road explodes out to a full 10-foot road as it connects to the road coming out of Red Wharf over here. And that ties them together quite nicely. We've got an odd little junction here where we've got essentially 5 roads. So we're kind of getting into the idea of this is somewhere that's likely to be named. We're not going to call it 5 points because that would be a bit derivative. But we can have something along those lines to represent the fact that this is 5 roads coming in here. I'm just going to move that to fit into the crossroads better. We've got essentially a crossroads here that will be known as being a crossroads. We can put, I don't really want this to be a stone building, so I'm just going to change the settings here. I made a note last time I was doing this of what the colours for the wooden and stone buildings are. And I made that note. Not in the file I'm currently looking at. So where did I make that note? I thought I'd put it in the file that I had open while working on this, which was the adventure that's taking place tomorrow in this setting, and I thought that's where I had made a note of those colours. But apparently I didn't. Apparently I had a different file open as well, and I put it in there. It's entirely possible that I had the Keep open, because I used the Keep, which is it's quite old now, but it is a campaign management program from Emboss Software. I've used it for well over 10 years, because I've used it for the whole time I've been working on this, and this is over 10 years old. Roundabouts are a modern invention, Robinson. Roundabouts, kind of by their nature, are sort of dependent upon modern streets. We don't have modern streets in this setting, so we therefore also do not have roundabouts. So let's just take a quick look at the Kalwin's Bay file that I know I added to this and see if that's where I made a note of these colours. I suspect it probably is. Gurdwhistle, not the Peak's Edge, but Kalwin's Bay. Kalwin's Bay. Yep, there we go. It's numbered colour 38. So I want to swap all of these to colour 38, which looks like, nope, that's 39. So it must be that one. And that will give me my stone building, my wooden buildings instead of stone buildings, as per my requirement. Okay, and we can insert our building in this corner here. I'm not saying I couldn't put a roundabout in here, or that anyone else in their own cities couldn't put a roundabout there. Of course you could put a roundabout there. I've just built that building almost certainly on the docks sheet, but it may not have done. But just to be on the safe side, I am going to do a sheet edit on it and make sure I'm putting it on the buildings sheet where I actually want it to be. Yeah, you see, the thing with roundabouts, the reason roundabouts exist, is they're a way to keep traffic moving. When you get a crossroads, when you get a junction, one side has to stop for the other side to move on. Now, in practice, of course, that works with roundabouts as well, because you have to pause long enough to be able to get into the stream of traffic going around the roundabout. But in theory, if the traffic is relatively light, you don't have to stop. You just pull out onto the roundabout into a gap, and you go round and come off again. And it saves, everybody can move kind of at the same time, rather than needing something like traffic lights to swap back and forth between the things coming in from different angles. And for that, you need a lot of heavy traffic, and you don't really get that heavy traffic, and heavy traffic that you really need to not have bang into each other. And you don't get that kind of heavy traffic until you get into motor vehicles, to be honest. You could apply it for carriages. I'm not sure when the first roundabout was invented, but I'm pretty sure it was in the motor vehicle age. But it's much easier for people on horseback or with carts and carriages and so forth to negotiate a corner with their fellows, if only because the people driving them are on the outside where they can talk to one another. And they can yell at one another, get into a road rage situation and have a punch up, but they're more likely to be able to go, well, just bloody move your carriage and then I can get through. So we don't really need roundabouts under those circumstances. I'm going to shift. I'm being pedantic again, being pernickety again. I'm going to shift the line on this very slightly so that it lines up better with the one coming down from the other side, opposite there. Now, what I could put here, of course, instead of a roundabout, I could put a square. I could put in a plaza there, and you've got a number of roads coming into a plaza, where you come into the square and then you work out where you're going afterwards. I'm deliberately leaving this as a crossroads instead. Often when you find crossroads in my cities, I will have put a square in there because it's a good place for them. Yeah, very modern indeed, apparently. Yes, thank you. And they were, I believe, invented as an answer to road traffic congestion. And this was back in the days when there was a lot less traffic than there is now, so says something. In this instance, I just like the idea of this crossroads, things growing up around this crossroads. So I'm going to leave this specifically as a crossroads. I might put a square in, but not put it at the crossroads. What if I delete that building there and I use the polygon road tool to do something like, I'm trying to match the angle of the road as best I can. Oops, that wasn't what I wanted to do. And it came in too far anyway, so let's do this again, but we won't come all the way in so far. We'll go to about there. We'll try and match the angle of the road as best we can, and this time we will remember that it has to come up to there. And now we've got our square. But the crossroads is on the edge of the square. It's not the square itself. Do we like that? I think I prefer the crossroads, just the crossroads. So maybe instead what I'll do is I'll still do that basic idea, but we'll come over here and we will come in a little bit further than we did last time. We will go past that building. And we'll do it like this. So now we've got a square offset from one of the roads and the junction is still over there. Let's put an oddly shaped building in to fill this space here because somebody would have filled that space. You just know somebody would have filled that space. That's just too key a location for nobody to have built on. And the same can be said over here. We've got a very narrow section there. So I think what we might do is use a polygonal building and drop it down to 3 nodes. In other words, a triangle. Now, you may be able to tell what I'm doing here is I'm trying to place it further away and then move it into position rather than try and draw it in the right place, because if I try and draw it in the right place, I'm bound to pick the wrong starting point and just mess the whole thing up. And yeah, that's not going to work because the angles are wrong. So I'll just do it manually. Let's come back and we'll go back to our weirdly shaped building. Although if I go with this one, this is literally, you can draw any shape you want with this. So that would give me my nice sharp point if I do that. Because I could literally just draw a triangular building and call that done if I want to. So there's that. I can do that. An alternative to doing that is I could have gone out further and done some shaping at the other end as well and had it as a really weirdly shaped building. Let's do something along those lines in this corner. So we can come along here, say, and then up and along. And I think I'm actually good with that. Like that. So it's a slightly weirdly shaped building, but it fits the road quite neatly. And I think I am going to do away with this building here. It's big and it's awkward and it's in the way. Better off putting in some manual stuff in that space, I feel. Okay, let's do some adjustment of these buildings here in terms of spacing. These are very widely apart. So let's gradually move them further this way. And I think afterwards I may move them closer to the road as well, because I think I've shifted them out slightly while adjusting them. But we'll see. No, they're probably okay as they are, aren't they? But now I've got a space here to put some more stuff in. I've got an odd little space here. But I'm going to use that odd little space here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a, air quotes, square. Which is to say, I'm just going to take a little chunk out of the road to one side there. So we've got a little space, open road space that is not actually, it doesn't belong to anything. It's just nobody has built in that space, and so everybody's using it, and you end up getting something that looks a bit like a little bit like a very small car park, I suppose. Now we'll go for some standard ordinary type building in here to fill that last space. And there we go. That's starting to make a little bit more sense. Again, we've got the buildings much closer together around that area there. And that makes sense for this crossroads, because if there is something special about this crossroads that people are all trying to make use of it. You've got things coming in from different parts of the city, coming in from outside of the city, and somehow there is something in this crossroads section. Tell you what, Robinson, one way I could have gone with something roundabout like here is I could have put in just a circular road area there, and then put maybe a tower in the middle of it. So you've got an artificial roundabout, not planned roundabout, but just where everybody's going to having to loop around the tower to get where they're going would work quite nicely. But we've definitely got, I think it's likely that what we have here is market space. Would make sense with this whole crossroad thing, because you've got lots of angles coming in. So at that point, people start to buy and sell. So maybe all of the buildings around it are shops. The open space there is used as a market. Maybe I could put a second market, in fact. Now we're starting to get some interesting plans going on here in my twisted little fishy head. If I do this, so now I've got two market squares very close together. Maybe one of them is general, the larger one may be general, and the other one more specialist, and they they're both taking advantage of these good communication networks with all these roads coming into that one space. And they're each selling whatever they're selling. So this is a good mercantile part of the city that people can come to, knowing that if they want to buy a particular thing, well, have you tried going up to Five Roads Market? There's a good chance you can get one there. You can get anything at Five Roads Market. I'm now, in fact, going to make a note of Five Roads Market. Because I don't want to forget that, having come up with it. Yeah, you could have a fountain plaza. Part of what a city looks like in terms of mapping like this comes down to what symbols are available in the mapping style. I like this mapping style because it's very clean, and it's kind of representative. It's not, here is a picture of a building in the space of this building. It's, here is a shape that must be a building. It's not what the building actually looks like. I rather like that for these informative type maps. They remind me of a modern version of the simple, almost silhouette black and white maps that AD&D was doing in the second edition era. Forgotten Realms Adventures had a lot of maps that were literally just black blocks for the buildings, and they looked really good. They were very clean and easy to use. And this reminds me of kind of like a flashier modern version of that mapping style. It's part of why I like this. So I don't have a plaza icon, but of course there's all kinds of ways I could represent that. I could use a flat building, in theory, a plaza icon, a fountain icon. I could just put anything I wanted in the center of a market, of a square that's round, and label it as a fountain. Just put it in a different color to separate it out from the buildings. Not have it so high. Perhaps use the docks building layer sheet that I've created, which is lower even than the low buildings, to represent that. Let's try and give an example here. If I set my current sheet to buildings docks, and I select a building. Now, we don't have round buildings per se on here. We could probably create something, but what we do have is this multi-point polygon building. And if I set that to something like, say, 12 nodes, and then I center it in the middle of this market space and move out just relatively small, it's not actually round, because it's 12 nodes. But with 12 nodes at that size, it's beginning to look pretty round. I'm just going to take a look at this building's docks and see what level of drop shadow I actually gave that. That's at an offset of 1. I have to cancel that, not apply it. And then what did I do for low? Low was also 1. So in fact, the docks and the low buildings are in fact at the same height. But that's not a problem. I can work with that. Actually, let's see what happens if I change the drop shadow on the docks, and I put it down to a 0.5 offset instead. Make it really low. So on our fountain there, that's clearly lower than the buildings around them. Now, the question is, does it look bad on the docks? If it looks bad on the docks, I'll have to set it back. But actually, I think it looks okay on the docks, doesn't it? They're not unreasonable at that level. They've still got a bit of shadow over the water. Yeah, I'm cool with that. So we'll leave it like that. Let's come back to the right places. Let's come back to Five Roads Market over here. And now we have got... Now, the downside with that is I've accidentally drawn it in wood, not stone. So I've got a wooden fountain, which is kind of unusual. So maybe that's not a fountain there after all. Or maybe I'll recolour it. Because I do have a note of what colour it needs to be. Which is, instead of 38, it needs to be colour 248. Which is going to be somewhere down here, isn't it? That one. So let's change that. And now it's stone. So now we've got a fountain in the centre of the larger of the two markets at Five Roads Market. Ta-da! How cool is that? Now, I am going to take a moment to send a message. Because there was a plan for Dratacarp to stream Elite Dangerous and for me to join her. And I think she was pitching for about 8:30. It's now 8:15, but she's not in this stream. I've not heard anything from her. I don't know what's going on with that. So I'm just going to check whether I need to wrap this stream up or whether I can keep going. And I'm going to try and type this on the correct keyboard. So for those of you who operate on only a single computer on your desk, stay that way. Don't be like me and put two computers with their keyboards right next to each other and use them both at the same time, because you just get lost and type on the wrong keyboard all the damn time. So yeah, let me just message Drat as much as anything to find out whether she's awake. That is a very good point. I have not saved recently. Thank you for that reminder. Spot the man who did not take a phenylalanine before this stream. Right, so let's carry on with mapping. We'll put some buildings coming out from the 5 points, the 5 roads here. We'll move. Oh, hello. She's typing a response, so she is at least awake. I know through a combination of insomnia and deadline, she was absolutely wasted earlier on because she was up working way too late. We're going to need something to fill this space here. So let's just go with one of these sort of kind of a default building style, but lets us pick the points instead of them being just rectangular. That's too close to the building that I'm putting it next to, but I'll move it slightly after I've put it in, because I can see that I've placed it too close. But if I just move it out very slightly like that, redraw to see how well it fits. Yeah, that fits quite nicely in there. And then for good measure, I am going to get some 5-foot dirt road, and I am going to just draw it straight across there. Now, I may need to move that slightly. Oh, I don't know though. It's not a bad fit. I think we'll come up a little bit because it's easier to move those buildings than it is to move the ones that are trapped in the corner. And we'll, oops, I'm still moving the same point. I thought I'd moved to the other point, but apparently I hadn't. Now I should be moving the other point with a bit of luck. Yeah. Yes, there we go. And then we will move these two buildings up the road slightly. In fact, let's move these two buildings up the road a chunk. It's a technical term, a chunk. It's a technical distance. And then we can again use that tool to put in a building that actually follows the line of the road, because we can bring it up here like this and along like that, and we've got a building that has been built to fit the space, which works quite nicely. So we're definitely starting to get somewhere with this. I think I am going to go to which screen? Let's go with the text point of interest sheet, because this definitely needs to be on one of the text sheets, but which text sheet? And I think point of interest will do. And what we will do is we will go with a multi-line piece of text, and we will have it 5 roads market. So now I've got a label here. It's in the wrong color, but I can soon change that. The other points of interest I simply did in black. So I might recolor them to a different color, give points of interest their own color at a later date. But for now, we've got a point of interest label over the 5 roads market, so that I will remember that that's where the 5 roads market actually is. Does it? Okay. I'm actually quite pleased with that. You know, if it looks like anything in the real world, that's a step in the right direction, isn't it? By definition, these things have to look like something that could really exist. Otherwise, there's something very odd with what you're doing. Unless you're leaning very heavily into the fantasy element, of course. You can design cities that really don't look like anything that could ever really exist. 5 ways corner, 5 roads market. Yeah, it's the kind of thing, isn't it? That's the way these things get their names. They form accidentally, and then they get a name based on what they look like. People say, oh yeah, well that place with the 5 roads, the market with the 5 roads, and hence 5 roads market it ends up as being. I might put another bit of market in here, actually. Just thinking, why the hell, let's lean into this, why not? I want to come up here. Oops, messed that one up. Start that again. So I need my polygon. So up to there. Out to there. And there we go. Now we've got another little marketplace around 5 roads market. So now we've got 3 separate marketplaces and probably a bunch of shops. Right, so Buttercup is up and about. Let's find out when she's planning on streaming. Because I've got something like 7 missions, of which 6 are team missions, currently on the books for the current community goal in Elite Dangerous. So I really need to get in there and do that. Rather than go through the drawing process again, I am going to copy the fountain from that part of 5 roads market, and I'm going to put it in that part of 5 roads market. I'm not going to put one in the one over here, the slightly smaller one, but we'll put one in each of those 2. And we'll also slightly adjust this corner because I don't like the angle I've got it at. That's a better angle. Yeah, there we go. And then I'm going to nail that into place by putting in a building in this corner. And I've given myself some wiggle room on this by using the variable rather than just the rectangle, so that I can fit it to the corner that little bit better. And there we go. Now let's have one of these. So now I'm really messing with building shapes because I'm going with a sort of a dogleg shape building that fits neatly into that space there. And there we go. Hey, rookie! Welcome aboard. Now, I do not know at the moment how much longer I'm going to be streaming this because, oh, okay, no, it looks like Drut's delaying her stream, Elite Dangerous stream till 9, so I've still got another half an hour I can keep going with this. Welcome aboard. We are currently drawing a map for the city of Kalwin's Bay for a game that I'm going to be running on this channel tomorrow evening, in fact. And last week I started this city and I just did the dock area because I needed to export the docks for tomorrow's play. Today I'm looking at giving some structure to the rest of the city, and I got a bit tied up because I accidentally created this 5-way crossroads and started brainstorming what it could be. And it's ended up as a place called Five Roads Market, where there were 3 separate marketplaces and a bunch of shops and things in one place. And having done that, I'm now going to move back out to the structure of the city. Over on the western portion, we've got a lot of empty space at the moment. So I need some roads in there to shape that and start giving us sort of more over here. So let's look at what we can do in this part of the city to get a bit of structure added to that. Let's go with a 10-foot smooth road coming out of here. And I'm going to curve it down towards here, I think seems reasonable. And then I'll just delete the building that I've just gone through, because it was only an initial framework building. Having put that bit of road in there before I put any buildings on it using the street tool, I want to connect it to this road coming along here, because this kind of dead ends at the moment, this road. So I'm thinking that's a good place for another square. A plaza square type of arrangement. And then I can connect that to our new places. So let's have a straight road that is going to come from just inside the old city gates. These are gates that are not used because there is no wall in this city. This is the remains of an old wall. Again, established that last week. I put that slightly too high, so I get the opportunity to show the versatility of this tool. Having drawn that road in slightly wrong, I'm just going to use the node edit and adjust that road down like that. No, I don't like it like that. Let's try and compromise, get it lined up as best we can with being, I want a straight road. Despite my saying earlier on I didn't like the straight roads, I want a straight road going across, but then I also want it to be kind of almost parallel to the wall at that end. So we've got that one there. That works quite nicely to connect this square up. We can do something similar coming in from down here. Let's go with there, and we'll just move up and connect it to that road. And then let's have one that goes from here up to this road, and we'll do it not quite straight, just to avoid that uncanny valley, why are these all straight lines thing. I'm not going to delete this building, that would be silly. I'm going to move the building very slightly so that it's no longer a problem. It might well get moved further away from that at some point and put in and replaced with a building that actually fits the corner, but for now that will do nicely. And then we'll come from the corner, because I do like things that go through corners. Things that go through corners are fun. There's kind of an instinct when you're mapping, especially when you're dealing with a square, when you're drawing a nice square. There's kind of an instinct to have, like, a road coming out of each side, or maybe two from one side, and evenly spaced around them. And that's not necessarily the way it works. So I kind of like sometimes to have things go out through a corner, which is always just feels a bit weird. But it's the kind of stuff that you do find. I don't like the angle that that's at, though, so I'm going to try moving it to about there. Yeah, let's try that. That's quite nice. We quite like that arrangement. Street tool will now fill that with buildings. Oops, went too far on that one, but that's okay. I can move or delete that building as desired. And we'll come up here. And suddenly this part of the city is looking a bit better formed. Ooh, lots of stone buildings along that road. I wonder why that is. Sometimes the RNG can suggest features for your city. Just the fact that this is randomly choosing whether a building is going to be a wooden building or a stone building as I place it using the street tool for these initial outline buildings. They can suggest features like there. We've got a road with, there's 5 stone buildings in a row along that road. Why is there so much stone construction there? Stone construction is generally more expensive construction, so therefore we're looking at either maybe they might be civic facilities, or they might be wealthy people. So perhaps that is a street of wealthy people over on this side. Maybe we've established now that, well, we've got the docks all everything clustered together in the docks down on the side there, and we've got the fishermen off to the east. Maybe the wealthy merchants are up here. If that is the case, then I'm going to need markets on an even bigger scale than I've got at Five Roads Market over here to justify all these wealthy people. And they're going to need to be not smack next to where the wealthy merchants are living, because they wouldn't want their work directly outside their front door, but close enough to get easy access. So maybe we've got a major market area in this triangle here. That could work. So let's try and see how we're going to do that. I mean, for starters, that's probably a market square down at the end there. So we're already along the, going in the right direction. But let's go with paved roads. Let's have a paved market section. How are we going to do this paved market? What shape are we going to make it? Is it just going to be square? Or are we going to mess around with it a little bit and see what we can do? So let's parallel that road for starters, there. Then we'll parallel that road down there. Then we'll parallel that road back up a way. And then we'll mess with that a little way and see what we can do. Actually, I know exactly what I'm going to do to mess with that. Just for fun, I'm going to use a mirror copy. So right click on copy, select mirrored copy rather than just using the normal copy. Select entities, that one. Do it, and then I need a mirror line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my mirror line across here, and bam. I've now got a couple of very strange paved courtyards. I'm going to move them slightly because they don't fit desperately well here as they are. Let's move them to about there. And then I am going to just, to distinguish even further, I'm going to take a 10-foot dirt road and I'm going to draw it smack between the two of them. I'm just going to do a little stretch of dirt road now, just until I know we've got it looking right. And we will adjust things somewhat. Let's move this node because these aren't lined up quite right. That's lined up about right. Is this your secret evil layer base of operations? Now, if it was a building, yeah, that really does look like it would be spot on for an evil layer building. Why does it look like a building? It's got a drop shadow. Why has that paved road apparently been drawn on the building layer? I'm just going to check what layer that's on. So, I'm going to select buildings, where I suspect it's gone for no good reason. I'm going to hide everything else. It's not made it a building. Is it a low building? No. It's certainly not a high building. I don't think it's a dock. No. It really has put it on the roads layer by the looks of it. It just looks, yeah. Oh, one of them's on the roads layer. Why is the other one not? Yeah, that's weird. That second one is not on the roads layer. I wonder what layer it's put it on. Why, when copying that, did it copy it to a different sheet? What did I have selected? I had text POI selected. It didn't copy it to that, did it? Yes, it did. It put it on the point of interest text layer. Well, at least now I know. So again, we're seeing how the versatility of the software is helping me to solve my own mistakes. Although, in all fairness, without the versatility of the software, I wouldn't have made that mistake. I just don't know why it did it. So we want to move that to the roads layer. And that one doesn't look like a road. Why is it? You know what? For all that it appeared correctly on the road layer when I did that, I'm going to... 4 entities picked? I'm very confused as to what's going on here. And since the road tool actually is a little bit... I don't know why there's 4 entities there. No, hang on. Let's hide all the buildings again. I can't hide buildings because I'm on buildings. I have that selected. Let's go to roads, and then I can hide the buildings. And I'll hide the buildings docks. Right. What is that black line? Because that is not a road. Nope, that is definitely not. I've hidden the roads now. So if I delete whatever that is, and then I show all again, these should now look like roads, maybe. Yeah, but I think I put both the road and the road background onto the same sheet accidentally. I can well believe it of you, Robinson. I can well believe it of you. You know what? Cute though this was, too much hassle trying to fix what's gone wrong with it. So I'm just going to get rid of the whole thing and start all over. And maybe we won't do something so weird this time. Or maybe we will. Who knows? Maybe we'll put the road in first and then draw our markets either side of it. So what if... we clear a space there, and then we've got a space already there, so we'll use that. Right, now, let's get our 10-foot road, because up here it definitely wants to be 10 feet, because this is coming off a 10-foot road, So let's come off this 10-foot road and we'll come down to here. Then we'll get a 5-foot road and we'll come up from here. And maybe we'll bring a 5-foot road in from this side as well. That's going to involve moving some things. As you can tell, I'm extremely well organized and forward planning when creating my cities, and I definitely under no circumstances make it up as I go along. I'm sorry, I think I said that the wrong way around. I'm not forward planning and I do make it up as I go along. That was it. Something along those lines. I knew it was. So let's have a road coming in from here. Right, so what we've got now, we've got some roads coming into an area where we know we want something resembling a market space. So let's get our dirt road polygon. And let's start with this is definitely part of the market. This is definitely part of the market. This needs to be part of the market. So let's have a sort of a strange kite-shaped space here with these roads coming into it. And we will call that our major marketplace. That seems to work quite nicely. I can work with that. Yeah, I can definitely work with that. But maybe not on its own. I was originally going to make that a paved marketplace, wasn't I? So let's have our paved marketplace be separate from that. Let's have one big not paved marketplace, and then let's maybe have our posh market. For those who like to pay extra for their goods, for the privilege of having cobbles beneath their feet. And we'll get... Shall we use paved road? Yeah. Let's have a little stretch of 20-foot paved road connecting the two together. And we'll set that to the back so it'll be underneath the dirt. So there won't be a strange bit of paving in the middle of this dirt space here. What do we think of that? It has potential, but it's not right, I think, is my feeling at the moment. The idea is not bad, but I think I'm going to need to experiment and think it through better. So I definitely want to put a second market in here and maybe a paved market, but I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet. But we've got our main market that I do quite like in that section. And I'm okay with that. And this half of the city is looking less empty now. I think I want more in this central space. So let's start from there. Come up. And then up to here, and I'll need to rearrange these buildings a little bit to make room for the roads, obviously. I can move these easily enough. Right, there we go. And we'll do some up here. There we go. And now we're starting to populate the center of the city a little bit. So let's make sure we've got that saved. Yeah, okay, so I'm reasonably happy with the way this is coming along at the moment. So I think I am going to call it there. There's obviously still a lot to be done, a lot of decisions to be made, and somewhere off stream, when I'm less self-conscious about the mistakes that I'm making experimenting with it to make it work, I'm going to try and put a second market into that big central marketplace, a more high-end market with paved roads. I have no paved roads in this city at the moment. Theoretically, I could replace or overlay the roads in some of the posher sections with paved roads after the fact, representing the fact that possibly the rich people are paying or just bringing enough pressure onto the city government to get cobbled roads in their parts of the city. But for the most part, this is just packed earth for these roads. It's a frontier region. Paved roads are more appropriate for better established regions. This city, I'm giving it history as I create it, but this city is still only a couple of 100 years old because it was built when the area was reopened in that time scale. This is still a frontier region. This is the civilized part of the frontier region, but it is still a frontier region. So I don't want anything too spectacular and ancient in Kalwin's Bay. I think it'll work out quite well as it's going at the moment. I'm happy with some of the results that I am getting. It's a long-term project. It really is a long-term project because I want to do a good job on this city. And while you can create a town or small city using these tools pretty quickly, as you can see from what I've done on stream, I like to go in and hand tune everything for the fine detail and make it fit. And then I come up with ideas and I change things, and it takes a very long time. So somewhere like Red Helm's Peak has taken me a very long time to do. I was literally months on this map. Red Helm's Peak. No, wait, that's the wrong Red Helm's Peak. That's the right Red Helm's Peak. So we'll open that. And, oh, yeah. So, that's not what the Red Helm's Peak map actually looks like. Let's turn on the effects, shall we, boys and girls? And that's what the Red Helm's Peak map actually looks like. So what I've done with this is I've marked out the different neighborhoods, the different districts of the city, and I've got those color blocks over them on a layer that is mostly transparent. So once you turn the effects on, you've got a nice color filter that separates out the different districts, and you can see where you are by looking at them. This is obviously the same mapping style as the one I'm using for Kalwin's Bay. It's big, unless my players decide otherwise, because I do not like making too many decisions ahead of time in any campaign, because in the same way that Murphy's Laws of Combat Operations say that no plan survives contact with the enemy, no campaign survives contact with the players. They could choose to go anywhere they want, do anything they want, but my hope is that they will wind their way north to this city, and I will get to use this lovely Red Helm's Peak map for them to adventure in. This is obviously in a mountainous region. You can tell by all the rocks around the outside. This is literally at like the foot of the mountains. And this literally took me months of work to create this, because I know, that a competent mapper could have done it a lot quicker. But as I have said many times before on Mappa Monday streams, I am not a professional cartographer. I am not even really a very good cartographer. I am a competent game master cartographer. So I can create things that are good enough for my games. And in the case of this one, and Kalwin's Bay, trying to create something that is good enough both for use in my game and also for use in someone else's game when I publish it. So going to a slightly higher standard, trying to get them publishable. But even so, if I can do it, you can do it. Whether using Campaign Cartographer or some other tool, I'm a big fan of Campaign Cartographer. I've been using it for years, and it's what I'm used to. But there are a number of other tools out there of varying costs, from free up to, my God, that costs how much? Honestly, Campaign Cartographer falls more into the my God, this costs how much category, but you can often pick it up on something like Humble Bundle as a cheap option. And yeah, if I can do it, anybody can do it, really. It's just a matter of practice and learning the techniques. The best piece of advice, the last thing I am going to leave you with, the best piece of advice I can give to anybody who wants to get good at drawing maps for their campaign is draw maps. Not just for your campaign. If you only ever draw a map when you need it for an adventure, you don't get the practice. Draw maps for the sake of drawing maps, for the practice. When you get one you like, file it for use later. Write an adventure around it later on. But if you draw maps, each map is slightly better than the one before. And then when you get around to needing one for your game, it'll be slightly better than the ones that you've drawn leading up to it. Whereas if you only ever draw the maps you need for your game, they get slightly better each time. But only incrementally. There's no big jumps because you haven't got anything in between. So yeah, map for the sake of mapping. Don't map just because you need a map. And that is where I am going to end for today. So I will be back on I'll be back on this channel tomorrow at 7:30 for Echoes of Legend, the campaign that I've been drawing the Kalwin's Bay map for. That will be with Alia, Chrono Magistrate, and Dratacup to play some Obsession. And I will be back on my other channel, Fish Not Fish. You can see how that's spelt above my head in a very few minutes, hopefully, to play some Elite Dangerous. So if you like people being murderized in spaceships, then do feel free to join me there as well. And in the meantime, as always, till we meet again, may your dice be hot and your characters cool.
1, 2, 3, 4. Whoa. Whoa. The fire's getting stronger. Whoa.